This is SSN
Story Studio Network.
Welcome to the Fatigue Fixer podcast. Have you ever wondered why you and most of the women you know seem tired so much of the time? Well, this is the podcast where we explore why. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Vedboncoeur. I'm a naturopathic doctor, hockey and baseball mom, bookworm, and nerd at heart who's fascinated by the state of modern women's health and well-being. I've had the privilege of treating thousands of women in my practice over the past 14 years, and hearing your stories has taught me an important lesson. Women are incredibly strong, resilient, and self-aware. And yet, too many of us are struggling to show up fully in our lives because we're tired and unwell. I want you to have the energy you need to share your unique gifts with the world because we are in desperate need of more female leadership. So join me for conversations that will help you feel less alone, more informed about all the things that might be draining your energy, and inspired to fix your fatigue and wake up every morning feeling rested and excited for the day ahead. I can't wait to share today's episode with you. So let's get into it. Last year, I decided to do something different. For the past many years in my work, I had spent my time doing all the things. I had created all kinds of programs and memberships and free downloads and all the things one is supposed to do when you are in business. It was great while it lasted, but it also meant that I constantly felt overwhelmed. I felt like I was never making any progress, and I would always get to the end of my day and feel like I had never made it through my never-ending to-do list. So last year, I decided to do things a little bit differently. And I took the very wise advice of my financial coach, April, who always reminds me to squeeze my lemons. Now, if you're wondering what the heck that means, it means that instead of always trying to add shiny new things, which is what most entrepreneurs like to do and want to do, she encouraged me to look at the things that I already had and to really squeeze the juice out of them, get the most out of the things that I was already doing in my business. Here's what happened. I had more energy last year. I slept better. I felt less overwhelmed. I felt more satisfied and I felt more accomplished. And the same concept could help you, especially if you're someone who feels like you never have enough time. 2025 could be the year that you lean into your strengths and maybe spend less time trying to fix all of your weaknesses. What if you focus on squeezing your lemons and becoming really good at one or two things, instead of perpetually chasing shiny objects? My friends and I literally joked about buying each other squirrel t-shirts because we are so easily distracted. And every time we would see something new and shiny, we would be like, squirrel, because our brains wanted that thing, even though it was 100% a distraction. This is the one where you stop chasing more time. And today's episode is going to help you get clear on what your priority is. Notice how I did not say priorities. More on that in a minute. Because you don't actually need more time. You would actually just fill it right up with more stuff, right? How many retired people do you know who say things like, I have no idea how I had time for work? They now have all this time, but they just fill it right up. I have several patients who have been on burnout leave. They are literally off work to rest and recover, but they end up filling their days because their mind is programmed to get shit done mode. They do not know how to rest and relax. So I know we all think that having more time would fix so many of our problems, but I promise you it would not, because we would just put more stuff into that free time and we would still feel like there was never enough of it. What most of us actually need is an honest look at what really matters to us. We need to make sure that our actions are aligned because it's very easy to say that something is important or a priority, and then we actually act in a completely different and opposite way. And the hardest part of all is learning to get comfortable being just okay at some things so that we can excel and shine where it really matters. I know the perfectionists in the crowd right now are cringing, and I know you're really going to struggle with that part, but stick with me because it is so worth it. So let's get into it. The first reason why most of us feel like there is not enough time is that we are scattering our energy in a million different directions. I want you to, for a moment, imagine a beautiful garden. It's got lots of different plants and bushes and shrubs and beautiful flowers. And each plant in that garden represents a part of your life. One part might be your work, your kids, your pets, your family, your hobbies, your parents. But here's the catch. Every day, when you go to water your garden, you only get one watering can worth of water. And that represents your time and your energy, which are limited. If you take that one can of water and you spread it evenly across all the plants in your garden, each plant might end up getting a few drops of water every day. So what's going to happen to those plants over time? They're probably going to wilt, dry out, stop flowering, and eventually they probably are going to die. And that's what a lot of us feel like. We feel like a dried up, wilted plant that hasn't flowered in years. And despite that, even though our gardens are already struggling, half of us are going out there and looking around and saying, oh, maybe I should also water my neighbor's garden. That would be really nice. I bet the neighbors would really appreciate it if I watered their garden. I mean, I'm already out here and their garden looks like it needs water too. So now you're taking your precious time and energy and you're scattering it even more. I want you to imagine something different. What if you tended to that garden a little bit differently? You still only have the one watering can, but instead of giving every single plant a few drops every day, you picked a couple plants that you love, and the ones that looked like they maybe needed extra water that day, and you gave them a good watering. You'd focus your attention on just a couple plants every day, and the odds are your garden would be so much more beautiful and the plants would be happy and thriving. Sure, a couple plants might die out because they weren't watered often enough, but your favorites would be so beautiful you wouldn't be upset about a couple wilted plants in the back. The way that most of us are living is the equivalent of giving a few drops of water to dozens of plants every day. We give a little bit of our time and energy to dozens and dozens of responsibilities. Work, people, projects, pets, self-care. The list goes on. And then we wonder why we get to the end of the day. We somehow feel like we've gotten nothing done, even though we have been busy all day long. We're overwhelmed. And at the same time, we feel like we're making no progress. So why do we do this? Well, one of the reasons is that we're often unclear on what our priority is, or we put everybody else's needs and priorities ahead of our own. I want to take a little moment to talk about the word priority. I love this word, and the history of it is fascinating, which is why I want to share it with you. So priority comes from the Latin root word prior, which means first or precedent. So priority meant the very first thing or the most important thing. So by definition, someone or something could only have one priority. It was the thing that took precedence over everything else. And then came along the Industrial Revolution, and modern productivity and hustle culture, and it became priorities. Because we now assumed that we could have multiple things that were important at the same time, that we could just multitask our way through it and juggle a whole bunch of important things at once. The problem with that, as most of us are learning the hard way, is that if everything is a priority, then nothing truly is. But how can I choose just one thing? I hear you saying. My kids are my priority, but I need to work and earn a living. I want you to think about if you found out that you were really sick or that you were dying tomorrow. And by the way, I know this is maybe morbid, but we are all in the process of dying. And I think if we acknowledge that, we might choose to live our lives very differently. If you found out your time was limited, which it is, what would you instantly let go of? What would you instantly stop doing? What would your priority be if you knew your time was limited? I want to encourage you not to wait until you get sick or close to death to figure out what really matters. Because when we aren't clear on our priority, we fall back onto our default patterns. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a goal that you want to eat healthier, but you also want to leave work early so you can be home and spend more time with your kids. The problem is, if you take a proper lunch break, it means you have to stay at work longer, so then you aren't there when your kids get home. Now, if you're like most women I know, I bet you're thinking, no problem, I'm going to have both. I can do both. I'll just work through my lunch break while eating a healthy salad, and then I'll book it home earlier so I can be there for my kids. Without going into details about why that's terrible for your digestion, and we're going to do a whole episode on that, so stay tuned, and how working through lunch is actually making you way less productive for the rest of the day, it brings up the second reason why most of us feel like we never have enough time, and that is competing desires. Most of us have lots of different goals, and maybe we have multiple priorities, but we often don't realize that they conflict or compete with each other. And again, if you're not really clear on what your actual priority is, you're going to revert unconsciously to your default patterns, which in this case could be people-pleasing for your boss and getting more work done. It could be perfectionism, hard work, being a reliable employee. There's nothing wrong with these things, but if you aren't aware that those are your default patterns, you're going to choose those every single time and then wonder why you can't figure out how to take a lunch break. So in this case, if you're falling into your default patterns, it's going to mean that you're going to work through lunch while shoving some food into your mouth. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with prioritizing work and being efficient, but you might find that you're frustrated about why you can never seem to get away from your desk, even though your colleague somehow seems to be able to get out for her lunchtime walk every day. And now you're not making any progress on your goal to get healthier, and you get frustrated. So let's go back to the idea of just eating while you work, right? Multitasking. Apparently women are really good at multitasking. I have some bad news for you. Multitasking is a giant lie. What we're doing when we're multitasking is we're actually just switching super quickly between tasks. So what we're actually doing is not multitasking, we're task switching. And every time you switch from one task to the other and back over and over again, that takes a big mental toll. They've literally done studies on this that multitasking is making us dumb. There are studies showing that it can reduce productivity by up to 40%. So it's actually doing the opposite of what we want it to do. The reason most of us are multitasking is because we think it'll help us get more done. It's not. It's helping us get less done. And it temporarily lowers our IQ by as many as 15 points. Again, it's literally making us dumb. When we multitask, it actually takes us longer to get things done. We make more mistakes, and it increases our stress. So going back to this idea of a priority, what if instead of priding ourselves on how good we are at multitasking, what if we started rewarding ourselves and being proud of monotasking, where you literally pick one priority that you want to work on, and you pour a bigger percentage of your time, your energy, and your resources into that one thing? What would happen if you started pouring your undivided time and energy into the things that were most important to you? What would your health, your energy, your life look like at the end of this year if you focused on watering a few key plants in your metaphorical garden? Instead of scattering your energy and trying to be good enough at 15 or 20 different things, what if you picked 1, 2, or 3 things that you wanted to be really, really good at this year? Part of what that requires, which is one of the reasons most of us don't do this and why we have resistance to doing it, is that if you want to excel in those few key areas that really matter to you, you have to get comfortable being just good enough in other areas. And a lot of us are perfectionists. And that perfectionist part wants us to be good or great or perfect at everything we do. And that is literally impossible. When you get comfortable with being just good enough at certain things, it allows you to pour more time and energy into the things that matter. So I'll give you an example from my life. I will never have a spotless house. I don't like cleaning. I don't care for things to be spotless. That is not a priority for me. My priority is that I would much rather spend my evenings reading, taking a bath, or doing a puzzle. So I will settle for good enough in the cleaning house department in order to have time, energy, and resources left to do the things that really matter to me. And that brings up reason number 3, why most of us feel like we don't have enough time, is that we are not willing to accept trade-offs. We're not willing to accept that certain parts are going to suffer or not be as good or just get ignored. We have a really hard time with that. But I'm going to ask you to make a commitment today with me, which is this. Can we all agree today, once and for all, that a to-do list, our to-do list, will never actually be done? We'll just add more shit to it. It's never actually going to be done. Can we stop trying to get through this to-do list because it's never actually going to happen? And what happens when we try to get through this never-ending to-do list is that we keep ourselves super busy. Most of us, from the minute we wake up until the end of the day when we crash onto the couch or into bed, we are busy. We are constantly doing all these different things. And yet, we feel like we're never getting anything done. And the reason we feel like we're never getting anything done is that all these different parts of our lives are getting just a few drops of water every day. They're getting a little spurt of scattered energy. When you scatter your energy in a million different directions, you don't actually make progress or meaningful progress in any of those areas. So then you feel like you're never getting anything done. You never feel like anything is actually being completed or finished or accomplished. So then we feel guilty, right? We don't feel good because things are not getting done. But it's really easy to keep ourselves in that perpetual motion and just keeping ourselves busy, because even though it's overwhelming and it's not fun, it often feels easier than what happens if we actually chill the F out and learn to relax and rest. Because a lot of us, when we learn to relax and rest, we feel guilty and we feel uncomfortable and doesn't feel good. So it's so much easier to keep ourselves in perpetual motion. But there's a big difference between being busy and being effective. Most of us would win a gold medal in the busyness Olympics. Okay, we are killing it in the busy department. Everyone gets all the gold stars for being busy. But busyness doesn't give results. What gets results and makes you feel probably more accomplished at the end of the day is being effective. And the way that you're going to be effective is by channeling your energy into a few key places instead of scattering it all over the place. One of the things that I've learned about myself is that I have some very sneaky ways that I keep myself productive. So I was chatting about this the other day with my best friend Andrea about how we love efficiency. I used to joke that efficiency is my love language. It's just another way to be productive, right? When you're trying to be efficient, you're just basically trying to jam more stuff into your day. It's just another way that we're all trying to do more and be more productive. But the way that we can actually create more time is not by optimizing and having the perfect system and having the best planner and being the most efficient. It's by being radically selective with what you choose to do and where you choose to put your energy, right? Productivity is just helping us get more shit done in a shorter amount of time. It just fuels this need we all have to perform and achieve. If you want better results, if you want your garden to thrive, you need to narrow your focus and you need to send energy in fewer directions. Here's the reality. And I know people are not going to like hearing this. We all have 24 hours in a day. We all also have all different responsibilities, but we all have 24 hours. Assuming that you're sleeping for 8 hours, which I hope you are, and if you're not, please start doing that. Assuming you work for about 8 hours, that leaves 8 hours for everything else. That will include your commute and getting your kids ready and all the other things. But that's still 8 hours a day. And yet most of us feel, again, like we are starved for time. We feel like there's never enough. But when most of us are really honest about how we spend our time, we find that we are wasting a lot of it in things that are not important. How much time are you spending on your phone? Pull it out right now. Look at your stats. Most of us are spending multiple hours a day on social media. How many hours do you spend vegging and just numbing yourself out in front of Netflix? Again, there's nothing inherently wrong, but I'm telling you what you don't need is more time. What you need is to learn how to manage your energy, your resources more effectively, so that at the end of the day, you're not so pooped that the only thing that you can handle is scrolling and vegging in front of a screen. I want you to think about this idea that you probably have more time than you think. And again, even if you had more time, you would just fill it. More time is not going to give you different results if you come at it with the same mindset and the same habits. Energy is often the limiting resource, right? That watering can, if you want it to be bigger so it holds more water and you can water more plants, you have to learn how to conserve that energy. Don't use that water to water dead plants. What are the dead plants in your life right now? What are the things you keep pouring energy and time into that you need to let die? If you want your flowers to thrive, you got to stop watering the ones that are dead. You got to figure out which ones you want to help thrive. And then if you want to have more energy, you need to figure out how to do things that put more energy in the tank. And I can tell you that scrolling and watching Netflix at night are not it. I know that when I spend my evening puzzling, I'm going to have way more energy in the bank the next morning than if I veg out and watch Gossip Girl, which is what I'm currently binging and rewatching, FYI. We squander so much of our time away with crap that doesn't really matter to us, but it's stuff that we feel like we have to do or we should do. And I want to encourage you, as soon as you hear the words should or have to in your mind or saying that out loud, I want you to look inside of yourself and ask yourself, who taught you that you needed to do those things? Because if you're saying should and have to, it probably isn't coming from you. And that might be a good plant to let die. Like that might be a thing to just chop. I want you to spend some time getting really clear on your priority. And you're going to have massive resistance because we have all been told that we can have it all. And you can, just not all at the same time. And the longer we try to have all the things at the same time, the more we're going to exhaust and overwhelm ourselves and burn ourselves out. So what is your priority right now? It's going to change from season to season. It will change depending on how old your kids are and what's going on with your health and what's going on with your work. So you need to check in regularly and get clear on your one thing. You could do this once a day. You could do it every week. You could do it every season. And ideally, when you wake up in the morning, you're going to pick that one most important thing for the day. And you're going to save your best energy for that thing. You're going to pour more resources. You're going to water that thing so it can grow and thrive. So I want to leave you with a little bit of homework, which is to write down your one priority for today or for this week. And I want you to say no to something, an obligation that isn't aligned with that priority. Maybe it's an invitation that you received. Maybe it's ordering takeout instead of just cooking a healthy meal. Maybe it's a play date that you organize that you really don't want to go to. What is something that you can say no to that releases time and energy for the things that you really want? In my experience, again, from doing this over the last year, you are going to make more progress by focusing, nourishing, and pouring your energy into one or two important things than to keep watering your whole garden and your neighbor's garden and your neighbor's neighbor's garden with water and then wondering why all the plants are dead. Your energy is a precious resource. Your time is a precious resource. You don't need more of it. You just need to be more selective about how you use it. I hope this episode was insightful for you, and I can't wait to hear about which plants you're going to prioritize in your garden this year. I will see you right back here in 2 weeks. Thanks for spending your precious time with me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you would send it to a woman in your life who needs to hear it. And there's no better way to help me reach more women who want to fix their fatigue than to take 2 minutes to leave a rating and review wherever you're listening to this. Ready to get more insight into what's making you tired? Find out which of the 5 most common types of fatigue you're dealing with by taking my fatigue fingerprint quiz at fatiguefixer.ca/quiz. Are you dealing with frazzled fatigue, where your body's exhausted but your brain won't shut up, making it hard for you to fall asleep? Or maybe you're more of the drained fatigue type, where no matter how much sleep you get, you're never rested and struggle to get up in the morning. Just take my fatigue fingerprint quiz and your results will include a list of recommended labs you can ask your doctor for, as well as my top recommendations for which habits and practices are best for fixing your type of fatigue. Find the quiz at fatiguefixer.ca/quiz. Because being tired all the time isn't normal, and you deserve to have good energy. Last but not least, I want to thank Jen Hudson and Mike Trutler over at Story Studio Network for bringing these conversations to life. I'll see you right back here in 2 weeks. Bye!